What is up? Happy Friday and welcome to the DFS Academy for NFL Week 7. It is time to build some lineups. Before we do so, I want to take a look back at Week 6 because something about my favorite parts of DFS happened last week. If you have that hunch, that gut feeling about a third string running back who has played no significant time in the NFL and he could just pop off, and you don't want to fit him into your home league lineup, or maybe you didn't win him on waivers, build a DFS lineup around him. It could literally win you $1 million. It did for someone last week. Let's get into it. What is up? Happy Friday. Hope you guys are ready for a great weekend. Welcome to the DFS Academy. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. With me, as always, Austin Amandolia. Austin, how are you doing today, my friend?
Doing good. A little jet lagged. Been on the West Coast this week, and I'm now back home. So my schedule's all off, and I brought home a nice little sore throat with me. So we're navigating that. But other than that, I'm excited for this weekend. Less excited. We're recording this on Thursday. Less excited for tonight's football game.
Oh, the Thursday night game is terrible. I'll normally have a little bit of action on the Thursday night game, Austin. I have almost none tonight. So FanDuel has a fun little bet that each quarterback will have 10 passing yards in every quarter. Thought that was interesting, so I put a little bit of money on that. And then this is my favorite. I have multiple bets that both quarterbacks will throw an interception on different websites where I'm able to parlay them and not parlay them. So I'm just betting on a terrible game at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's not an awful strategy for sure.
Yeah. You know what? You kind of led into something here that I was going to bring up to you later on the show, and I did not warn you that you were going to get this question today. As I was looking at this slate, specifically the defenses is what got me down, and I'm not going to let the defense make a decision for me. But overall, Austin, I'm not in love with this slate. And I imagine for you, who does this a little bit more seriously than I do, you're going to run into that more often. Do you lessen your money at risk? Do you double down harder on the lineups you really like? How do you approach a slate like week 7 for me, where I'm just not in love with this slate at all?
Yeah, it really depends. I will typically take the same approach for the main slate every week in terms of like 80% of my budget is going towards cash contest, 20% is going towards tournaments. But I still will pick and choose which tournament lineups I really emphasize. So if there's one that I feel really good about, then I'll put them in some higher dollar contests. If there's one I don't feel great about, then I'll put it in a lower dollar contest, which sometimes that bites me in the butt because I end up popping off with a Lamar Jackson lineup that I thought, oh, that's not going to be the one. But I do pick and choose my contests. I am also choosy about Sunday or about showdown slates. So I'm also going to be playing like a very little in this Thursday night game, just because I don't feel like I have a good read on it. But it definitely depends on the weekend. For me, like it may be, I would say a criticism of my approach is that it's probably too rigid, that I'm always like, I'm putting $50 in and this is how I'm splitting it. Because I do think that you need to shift. I shift more when it comes to playoff time too. So it does depend on the context. But when it's the main slate, I tend to be I have more of a consistent structure.
For me, I don't have a set dollar amount. I've done pretty well with my bets, so I have a good amount in my FanDuel wallet. And so I'm just going to keep going back to that contest. I love the guaranteed money contest on FanDuel. I build as many lineups with quarterback wide receiver stacks that I feel like building. So if I like this quarterback and I like him with his first wide receiver, I build a lineup around that. Second wide receiver, I build a lineup around that. If I like him a lot, I'll build one with both wide receivers and I'll throw a tight end. And I'll just go after I get past 50. I'm a lot like you. I'll start to feel like, okay, maybe I'm overdoing this, but I will say I doubled my money on FanDuel last week in DFS, and it saved me from a bad betting week because I had a terrible betting week. And so playing in that contest, sticking with my same strategy worked out really well last week. So it's just this week, I don't think I'm going to force it. I've been risking $50 to $75 every week. This week, if I come out of this thing only wanting to risk 25, I think I'm just going to stand pat because I look at this slate, especially on the FanDuel prices, and that's going to come up later in the show. I'm not loving some of the pricing we're seeing right now.
Yeah, for sure. And to your point about like your DFS helping out your other betting last week,
Yeah.
like I pay a lot of attention to that as well. I track like based on what website I'm on and what type of contest it is, how successful I am, how profitable I am on that. And this year I've actually had a hard time in cash. I've missed the cash line on multiple occasions, but I'm still profitable on the year because I had a big win on underdog
Yeah.
best ball. So I'm definitely continuing to maintain some exposure so that I'm mitigating my losses when they happen, because they're gonna happen.
Yeah, you're not going to get any dichotomy on this show, folks. Me and Austin are both for responsible gambling. Know what you can risk. Don't do more than that, and plan for the whole year. Austin's very good, and Austin's always been this way since I've known him. It's $50. That's what he's going in, and he doesn't go over that. And so, be responsible, make good decisions. Speaking of good decisions, Austin, let's get to the answers to the test. Someone made $1 million last week on a lineup that made me laugh when I saw it. So last week's Milli Maker scored 220.92 points. That is almost 20 full points less than what we've seen as the season high so far. Jordan Love was the quarterback. Austin made that call. Austin, this might be our first 3 running back lineup winner of the Milli Maker. And you actually, that might have been 2 weeks ago. No, I think it was last week. You said a 3 running back lineup could be viable, but I don't think we were expecting these 3 running backs. Derrick Henry, of course, Joe Mixon, mildly surprising. And as I mentioned in my intro, Sean Tucker. I'm a big Sean Tucker guy. I did not consider plugging him into a lineup. I went so heavy on Bucky Irving. Sean Tucker was the number 1 running back on the week and won this gentleman $1 million. Also threw Chris Godwin in there, Jalen Tolbert, Zay Flowers, Austin. Wonderful call on that one. What a week for Zay Flowers. K. Dotton, you've been beating the drum on that one. And then we were both in on the Tampa Bay defense, and they were actually number 1 in DraftKings scoring. And like I said, this guy, obviously this was his Tampa Bay lineup, Sean Tucker, Godwin, and the Tampa Bay defense. But it won the gentleman $1 million. So other than the fact that we called 4 of these 9 players, any takeaways from this lineup?
A weird one, to your point, like Sean Tucker popping off. That's again, this is it's maybe not the best thing in the world that we start the show segment talking about the Milli Maker winner, and then I talk so
And then
much
we
about
jump
how
right to cash.
and then I talk about how I never play the Milli Maker afterwards, and like
I play it every week, so.
But like to me, like this is one of the reasons I don't play it. Like I would not ever play Sean Tucker, and that's why I won't win $1 million. But I think like it's one of those things that this could trick us in some ways, where it makes us think, oh wow, I got to find that 1 third string running back every week. And
Do it.
this is the outlier. It's going to happen from time to time, but that is not best practice. This person probably had multiple lineups. They probably had some Bucky Irving ones, and then also had a Sean Tucker lineup.
Guarantee they had Bucky Irving ones, and this was their bailout lineup, and it bailed them out to the tune of $1 million. So.
Yeah. But what I will say that the process could have been, and that is interesting, is knowing that Bucky Irving was going to be chalky because Rachaad White was out, pivoting and getting leverage on Bucky Irving and saying, you know what, if there is a world where Sean Tucker is the running back that defends, then I can get a bunch of leverage. Again, I'm not doing that every week, but that type of process is the way I like to think about these tournaments.
And I would only do that in a situation where Bucky Irving himself wasn't an established running back. This isn't like the Detroit Lions where Jahmyr Gibbs or David Montgomery was out. If that happens, all the work is going to the other guy. Bucky Irving is an unknown commodity as it is, and not ready for a full NFL workload. Probably not built ever for a full NFL workload. So this made a lot of sense in a weird sort of way. If you guys have never watched DFS Academy before, we are going to break down cash plays for the tournaments where you're going to build your bankroll. That's Austin's specialty. And then towards the end of the show, we're going to give you some of our favorite tournament plays. Again, you want to pay more attention to Austin. I throw some wild ones out there. Sometimes it hits, sometimes it doesn't. If you guys are still playing season long, I imagine you are, and your season's not over yet, make sure you jump over to Trophy Smack. We have a great partnership with them. You can use the link in the description of this video. It's TrophySmack/WOFF, and we get a little percentage of whatever you buy there. If you're already going to buy something, it's an easy way to help the show. Austin, let's talk about those cash plays. We call it top of the class. These are the expensive players, and right away, you're starting off with my favorite play of the entire week.
Yeah, well, for very good reason, Kyren Williams should be your favorite play of the week. He's definitely my favorite play of the week, coming off a bye week, which is also helpful. He'll be rested up. He is $8,100 on DraftKings, $8,600 on FanDuel. And it's just the matchup is really good. Las Vegas has been pretty bad against running backs, particularly in recent weeks. In terms of season long, the Raiders have given up the 5th most points to the running back position. But over the past 4 weeks, they've actually dropped down to the 6th most while giving up more points per game. So somebody has leapfrogged them.
So, yeah, it's just everyone else is playing worse.
Yeah, exactly. But they're a good matchup, and I think that the Rams are still going to want to establish the run. Especially, we don't know yet if Cooper Kupp is officially going to be active on Sunday, and the offensive line has been banged up, so they probably really want to focus on the trenches, run the ball well so that they don't worry about Matt Stafford getting sacked 5 times in the game or anything like that. But also just the matchup so good. And Kyren Williams, he continues to get the role. Like I saw somebody pick up like Corum off of waivers in one of my fantasy leagues this last week. I'm not doing it. This isn't. I think people are trying to recreate Sean Tucker already by going towards.
That's a good point.
I just don't do it. Just play Kyren Williams. He's going to get the touches and the volume, and probably will score a touchdown.
Raiders have allowed a touchdown in 5 of 6 games this season, and against the Panthers, they actually allowed 2 touchdowns, 1 to each running back. So that's why I love Kyren as well. Is I think he's a touchdown machine. He scored in his last 8 games. I think it's just such a great call. Obviously, I'm rushing through the intro. We had a lot to talk about. I forgot to mention, if you guys want to play some DFS with Austin, myself, and some other great people from Club Fantasy in our group, there are links in the description of this video. We run contests on FanDuel and DraftKings. FanDuel is just the main slate. DraftKings, we do the showdown slates. Any slate you can imagine, you can get in with us over on DraftKings. A good time is had, a little bit of money is had, and if you win the main slates, we announce your name on this show. Austin, let's keep it moving on to the band nerds. These are the good students, but never really going to make it to the top of the class. We're talking mid-tier price plays, $6,000 to $8,000.
Yeah, so we're going to start with Brian Robinson, and we're going to talk about Brian Robinson, but this is really just like whoever the Washington Commanders RB1 is going into Sunday, because Brian Robinson is questionable, so it is possible that he sits out. If he does sit out, I am definitely pivoting to Austin Eckler, particularly because of his price point. So Brian Robinson is $6,400 on DraftKings. He is $8K on FanDuel, so FanDuel has found us out already on this one. However, Austin Eckler is $5,900 on DraftKings and only $6,600 on FanDuel. So he is definitely in play if Brian Robinson sits. We will find a theme of this show every year. There will always be one team that we pick on. Last year, it was Kelly's Arizona Cardinals. You could run all over them. This year, it is somebody's Carolina Panthers, who you can also run all over. They've allowed over 36 points per game to the running back position since week 3. Washington, this is what's wild to me. Washington has a nearly 30-point implied team total on Sunday.
I think it's actually up to 30 now. I was checking it right before the show started. I think they hit 30 today.
Jeez, because it's a 51.5 point over under, at least it was, unless it's moved north, and they are 8-point favorites.
It moved up to 8.5, so that's why they went to 30 even. They're 8.5 point favorites now.
So they're going to score a lot of points, and Brian Robinson could score 2-3 touchdowns, or Austin Eckler can. Particularly if Brian Robinson sits, I feel especially excited about this because I'm like, this is exactly what Austin Eckler was made for 4 touchdown games. That's what made us love him in the first place.
Oh my God. Well, now you're about to change every lineup that I have because you're right. This is an Austin Eckler game. I love it.
So that's my first pick. Now, my second pick is Kirk Cousins, who is $6,300 on DraftKings, $7,200 on FanDuel. Here's the thing. The quarterback position is a little bit iffy this week. I don't really want to pay up for the expensive quarterbacks. But Atlanta has a decent matchup. Seattle has allowed the 9th most points to quarterbacks since week 3. That's averaging over 21 points per game. And Kirk Cousins, he can be a little bit of a technician. He can sling the ball around. We saw him have that 500-yard game. Not expecting that to happen, but if he throws for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns, we're sitting pretty at that price point. I will say, just flag that I am contemplating whether or not I want to play Anthony Richardson this week. for the mere fact that he is 6K, he's cheap, and he's dual threat. I probably won't because the oblique injury scares me. If somebody told me they were considering it in cash, I'm not going to like gawk at it. But it does feel more like a tournament play this week. But I have to throw him out here just because of the nature of his pricing.
Austin, to say our chemistry in doing shows together is outrageous. I promise you, I was just looking at my rankings because I did not rank Kirk Cousins in my top 8. And when you say something, I listen. So I was going to adjust it. Currently, Anthony Richardson is my QB8. So I was going to wait until the tournament section to ask you if Anthony Richardson should be considered. So I love that you threw it out there. But I do think I want to reconsider with Kirk Cousins. One of the things I've learned from you on this show recently, as you know now, and just heard, I'm paying more attention to implied totals. And if I'm starting to understand how smarter people than me use implied totals and spreads, if there is a high implied total and a low spread, that probably means a good game for the quarterback and wide receivers, right? And that's kind of what we're dealing with in this Atlanta-Seattle game. They're actually tied for the highest over-under.
Yeah, I agree. And I think part of this for me is that Seattle, they're kind of middle of the pack against the running back position. So it's not like this is a clear smash spot for the running backs, although the Atlanta running back duo is crushing it right now.
I was going to say, and that was our issue last week with the Atlanta-Carolina game, was it's easy to be like, oh, these wide receivers are going to go off again, and Drake London had another nice game. But it was much easier to say Bijan Robinson, and unfortunately, the thorn in everyone's side, Tyler Algier, was going to go off as well.
So. Yeah, exactly. And I think part of this too is not just what the numbers tell us about the game environment, but how Seattle likes to play, what that tells us about the game environment, because they sling the ball around a ton and they produce a ton of offensive plays throughout the course of a game. Like we've seen Geno Smith throwing the ball 40 to 50 times, multiple on like regular occurrences this season. That's not even accounting for running plays, although sometimes they abandon the run. But if Geno Smith is going to be slinging the ball that much, it's going to push Kirk Cousins to do the same, which will, I think, continue to drive up his passing upside. And honestly, there's so many pass catchers that could pop off in this game. Like there's so many vehicles for Kirk Cousins to score touchdowns through the air, including even Bijan Robinson. So he could have a solid day. It's not saying that, Bijan Robinson's a bad play, but I think for cash, Kirk Cousins feels like he has a really safe floor.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. We're going to move on to Bookworms. We're talking the $4,000 to $6,000 players, easily underestimated, but these could be the ones that win you your game. And Austin, when I did my rankings, I got all the way to tight end. So I finished wide receiver, got all the way to tight end. And for someone's name popped into my head. And so that's going to be the second player you talk about. So I was so glad to see him on your board because he's probably my favorite play of the week, but I didn't make him my favorite play, but he will probably be in every lineup. I'm obviously building up here, but let's talk about your tight end first because he's the best damn tight end in fantasy football.
Yeah, exactly. So we have Brock Bowers is on my radar this week for cash contest. He is $5,800 on DraftKings, a whopping $7K on FanDuel. So what I will say here is the price point is actually a little bit prohibitive in my mind, especially because I'm trying to play Kyren Williams and because I'm trying to play Kirk Cousins. Like there's not a good quarterback punt option this week. There's also not a good receiving punt play this week. And we'll talk about it later. The defenses, actually, I don't love the punt plays there this week.
That's my biggest problem with this slate right now, but only I get mad about the defenses not having any good punt plays.
Right. So all of that caveat to say, if you can afford to put Brock Bowers in your lineup, I think it is an incredible play. Not just like, it's not that the matchup is like that killer, although it's been pretty decent. Like the Rams on the season have allowed their most points to the tight end position. They've allowed the 13th most since week 3, but that's a little bit misleading because the difference is they went from allowing 14 points per game to the position to 13.5 points per game. So again, we're running into that situation where just other teams have gotten worse. No Devontae Adams, so those targets have to go somewhere. They're going to go to Brock Bowers. I also like Jacoby Myers. So if you say you want to punt at tight end, play Colby Parkinson, who I think is another great consideration for cash tight ends. You could play Jacoby Myers and also get that volume. So it's basically saying like there's some vacated targets here, and sometimes we can get carried away with vacated targets, but I think this is a situation where it really applies.
Well, one of your favorite people in this industry, Kyle Borgnani, when I worked with him at the Footballers, he did a study, and it probably still holds true. Vacated targets tend to find their way to running backs and tight ends, not necessarily to the next guy up. And when you look at this team, they love to throw to Alexander Mattison and they love to throw to Brock Bowers. So that's not to say every Devontae Adams target is going to go to those two. Some are going to go to Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker and DJ Turner, but a disproportionate amount is going to move out of the wide receiver position. So I like that play.
I love it. Kyle's a smart guy.
Very smart.
So my other kind of punt play at the bookworm sections, I don't know. I feel a little bit nervous about this one, honestly.
Really? Because I'm going through and I got to tight end and I saw I could rank Travis Kelce. And then I was like, wait a second. If I could rank Travis Kelce, why didn't I rank JuJu? It's because he was so far down. I didn't make it to him when I was looking for my players to who I want. Because at Football Guys, all we do, we're just building a consensus. So we only rank our top 12 wide receivers. And so I got to 12 and was like, oh, I like these guys. But I got over it and I'm like, I like JuJu. I've been beating the drum for JuJu literally for waivers and redraft for 2 weeks. So I can't not play him this week, Austin.
That's fair. So I probably will play him in cash unless somebody tells me something that makes me think differently. But it's kind of weird to me. So JuJu Smith-Schuster is 4K on DraftKings, which is the reason I like him. He's already priced up to $6,100 on FanDuel. So I might be avoiding him on FanDuel. But
I'm telling you, FanDuel is a mess this week. I noticed that on so many players where I'm like, oh, he's super affordable on DraftKings. I get over to FanDuel and he's the 3rd ranked player. And I'm like, oh my God, like I can't even get him in my lineup. So.
Yeah. Well, and we've talked about this before. FanDuel tends to be more reactive than DraftKings does. They will, as soon as they see a player's performance over or under project from where it was, they just shoot them right up or down, depending on where it goes, which cuts both ways. And so they saw JuJu Smith-Schuster get 7 catches on 8 targets and 130 yards again in his first start as a Kansas City. Well, his first restart as
2024 start.
Yeah, 2024 start as a Kansas City Chief. And I think that's honestly why, like, if he gets 8 targets again at 4K, like, come on, that's free. You just take that every time. The reason I'm a little nervous is I'm like, are they really going to do that again? Like, it's kind of desperation. But then there's the other part of me that's like, well, Andy Reid coming out of a bye week is always incredible. And he just did this with JuJu Smith-Schuster, just like hopping on the plane and getting across to Kansas City super quickly. Like, so I think it could be a really good play. I'm also maybe contemplating it in tournaments, but I think he's definitely a good place to punt in cash.
For me, the reason he's almost going to have to be pinned in tournaments is because of the fact that everybody is priced up so high to get the lineups I want. I have to put him in there. So I'm almost hoping he's chalk because I want the free square. If he's not chalk, he's probably going to make or break my lineups this week. And then as we move on to my favorite category, this week it's probably my least favorite category because what we have to talk about. C's get degrees. These are your punt plays under 4K. And Austin, my goodness, I like to start at the bottom and work my way up when it comes to defenses. And with Buffalo, I had to get a little bit closer to the top on DraftKings than I'm usually comfortable with. On FanDuel, they're the highest paid play, but when I think about it in cash, where I need to be safe, they're the only defense I want to start, Austin. I hate the defenses this week.
Yes, I also hate the defenses in general. The 3 cheapest defenses are the Titans, who play Buffalo, Panthers, who play Washington, and the Browns, who play Cincinnati. Of those 3, I could see definitely 2 of them getting blown out. The Browns, their defense is tough enough that I'm like, maybe they keep it low scoring. So I think, to me, like, you could make the case one of 2 ways. For me, I'm like you. I'm looking to pay up. This week, I'm going to look at the Buffalo Bills going up against Will Levis, who has been a turnover machine this year. It's going to be in Buffalo. Weather's getting a little colder. Maybe that impacts Will Levis. Who knows? So
I'm in upstate New York. We had frost this morning, so this could continue into the weekend. So.
Yikes, it's that cold, huh?
Yeah.
Glad I'm not there. But I could also see a case where you just say, you know what? I need to make room for my salary elsewhere because, side note, I talked about Kyren Williams. I did not talk about Amon-Ra St. Brown, who I think is also a killer play this week. If you're trying to like find a way to force those guys into your lineup, which I wouldn't bat an eye at, you might just say, you know what? Screw it. Cleveland Browns, give me 3 points. That's all I need. And that's totally fine in cash. I would see the tournament.
I say it's such a good play because when I was looking for my favorite defense for the tournament plays, I had the Browns for a second. because there's that history where Joe Burrow's 1-5 against the Browns. Then when you go look back and look at the games he's had, 4 of those 6 games are 3 touchdown passing games. Like, it wasn't necessarily the Browns defense that kept them in the game. We know the Browns offense ain't keeping them in the game. So I'm nervous about that game. And I also don't like the other side though, because what if Joe Burrow really can't beat the Browns? Everybody's in on Cincinnati this week because of how bad the Browns look. The Cincinnati defense has been one of the worst. Like, every play I can find something wrong with it. And that's not normally how I am, except for this Buffalo play. I cannot find it, which means it's going to be the worst friggin' play of the week, but I'm hoping it won't be.
Yes, it does mean I'm not playing Buffalo in tournaments, most likely because I do think they'll be chalky, and it is often not advisable to play the chalk defense in tournaments. But for cash, I think it's totally fine, and it's a comfortable play. Again, you could punt it off a cliff and just hope that the Browns force the turnover, sack Joe Burrow, maybe score a touchdown, which all possibilities. Like, they blocked a kick and returned it for a touchdown last week. Myles Garrett is a beast. Like, I totally get the argument for it. So I would go either way. It's the decision point is going to be, do you want to pay up for the Bills, or do you want to just punt it off a cliff and pray that the Browns do something of importance this weekend?
I love that this has become a Browns section. Did you see the picture going around that Rodney McLeod, the backup safety for Cleveland, is tied for the team lead in touchdowns?
I did.
That's how bad the Browns are right now, folks. All right, that is the cash play section. So those are the safe plays. Those are the ones who are going to help you build that bankroll. Now we're going to move on to the tournaments. If you're looking to go for the bigger prize pools, these are some of the players you want to consider. Austin is going to give you enough plays that you can start his lineup at every position. I'm going to give you a couple of my contrarian thoughts and why I think they could work. And just as a reminder, if you want to get into a smaller tournament with here at Club Fantasy, we pay the top 3 spots. You'll find the link in the description of this video to play with us on both FanDuel and DraftKings. Austin, as always, we're going to get started with the quarterback. You like one side of this game, it makes sense that you like the other side as well.
Yeah, and part of the reason I like this side of the game, so first off, is Geno Smith is my tournament quarterback that I like the most so far this week. He is $5,800 on DraftKings and $7,600 on FanDuel. Again, this is one of the best game environments on the slate, not just from a over-under perspective, but from a pace of play perspective. It's a 51-point over-under right now, and it's only a 3-point spread, so it should be kind of a back and forth affair. It's interesting to me to see the numbers on this, frankly, because over the past 4 weeks, Atlanta has allowed the 18th most points to the quarterback position. That's not normally what I would look for in this type of matchup. They've averaged just under 17 and a half points allowed. I think some of that, like, maybe chalk it up to the fact that they played the Panthers in that span, and the Panthers aren't good. But I think also, to me, I'm like, as a Falcons fan, I don't feel like their pass defense is all that good. Like, they have AJ Terrell, and I'm always begging for AJ Terrell to get back to his peak version. But then outside of AJ Terrell, and I guess Justin Simmons, I mean, we have some nice defensive backs, but there's something about it that's like, we get gashed, is how I feel about it. Sometimes we'll get an interception, and it'll create these big splash plays, like we see Jesse Bates like doing wonders back there. But on a down-to-down basis, I don't feel like, our secondary is dominant, which I think is a key reason why I feel comfortable playing Geno Smith. Is I think that maybe he'll probably throw an interception because we're good at splash plays on defense. But I think on the way to get there, there's going to be a lot of yardage and catches allowed.
And you alluded to this. Seattle leads the NFL in passing right now. I cannot imagine the odds you would have gotten at the beginning of the season on Geno Smith leading the NFL in passing, which is what's happening right now. But no, you hit an interesting point, because Justin Simmons and Jesse Bates are both hit you hard in the box guys. And I feel like that's what kind of lets you guys get beat on some of these deep routes every now and then. So it's a very interesting point. For me at quarterback, this feels like it could be chalky, but he's also turned the ball over a little bit more than people want. And that's going to be Jordan Love. The main reason I want a piece of Jordan Love is he's affordable, at least on DraftKings. Again, this is where it is: $6,900 on DraftKings, $8,700 on FanDuel. But they being Houston, just allowed 3 touchdowns to Drake May. This feels like it's a 4-touchdown game to Jordan Love for me. So this is one where, if there's a 4-touchdown game on the slate, I think you want that as your quarterback, regardless of what it costs you elsewhere. And so that's kind of what I'm going here with that is that I'm a little nervous that Jordan Love is going to be chalk, but it's the right kind of chalk in my opinion. You're really already turning me on this Atlanta Seattle game, so I'll probably have more lineups there. But right now, Jordan Love feels like the safest play. And again, super affordable on DraftKings, not so much on FanDuel.
Yeah, well, I like it too, and I could see him not being terribly chalky because I think people feel like the Houston Texans defense is really good, and we've gotten that wired into our brain because of D'Amico Ryans and the way that he approaches the defense, and they have had really good stunts. They have a good pass rush, and I think also people are thinking that this Green Bay offense is not as good as it's been billed, even though Green Bay has one of the highest point differentials in the league. So I could see like the numbers misaligning with people's feelings and that pushing just Jordan Love's ownership rates down.
Anecdotal point that proves exactly what you're saying. So I had a buddy last week ask me Baker Mayfield or Jordan Love. And I told him Jordan Love felt safer. I am still not completely bought in. So Baker obviously goes off 4 touchdowns, and this might have been 2 weeks ago. But regardless, so he texts me Baker effing Mayfield. And I'm like, Jordan Love went off as well. Like, you can't be mad that I cost you 6 points when one quarterback had the greatest day of his life and the other one had the second greatest day of his life. Like, you probably still won. But yes, I agree. Baker had a great matchup. But just the point I'm trying to make here is people don't want to give Jordan Love any respect right now. And I think it's because he missed those 2 weeks and there's just a lot of negative, and he is turning the ball over at a much higher clip than I expected out of Jordan Love. Austin, let's move on to the running backs. You got a couple of good plays for us, though all words right now are that your first play is not playing this week.
Well,
so you're going to love the second play, but guess what? You can't play him with my play. So you guys are in trouble at running back right now. But Austin, if by some miracle Jonathan Taylor pulls a Michael Pittman, why do you like him this week?
Well, I like the matchup. He is facing off against Miami, who's allowed the 7th most points to running back since week 7. I also like him because I don't think people are going to want to play him coming off of an injury. And I think if he is healthy and he's running, that he's going to go low rostered. And Jonathan Taylor, like, he's been good when he's been on the field this year. So this kind of, is a moot point if he doesn't play, but if he does, definitely play him.
Well, I want to come in here now. So this feels like a Tampa Bay situation. So Trey Sermon is going to handle all the carries, but Tyler Goodson started to emerge as a passing down back last week. Do you like either of these guys as a tournament punt play, Sermon or Goodson? I see you shaking your head no already.
No, I hate it. I would just avoid it altogether, honestly. I will say
okay, before you talk about your next guy, I'm going to jump in, but go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if I have a lineup that I've been building over here that includes Geno Smith. If I were to take Jonathan Taylor out of that lineup does currently allow for me to pay up for Saquon Barkley. I don't hate the idea of Saquon Barkley in a revenge game. I think that could actually be really tasty.
Well, I'm going to jump to my guy first, which is not normally what we do because your guy is the counterpunch to my guy, and we've kind of already talked about my guy, and that's Brian Robinson. But you said word for word what I was going to say. Brian Robinson is coming off of an injury, and he is a little bit more expensive, and I don't think people are going to pay up. So that's why I feel like he is a little bit of a tournament play this week. Because if he does play, we saw what those Falcons running backs did to this Carolina defense. There's not to say both of our guys can't cash here. Do not build a lineup with Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler, people. Don't do it. But Austin, if Robinson plays, I think I want to gamble on him a little bit because I think people are going to pull off a little bit. If Robinson doesn't play, I am 10 toes down for your guy.
Yeah, well, even if Robinson plays, I'm
interested
in Austin Eckler, and this is part of the reason I kept him in here for this segment, even though I wasn't sure what was happening with, or we don't know what's going to happen with Brian Robinson yet. Is Austin Eckler? I'm almost more interested in him if Brian Robinson plays because of, to your point, what Atlanta did to this team. Now, I think Atlanta is a way better rushing offense in general than Washington is, so just want to throw that out there. But we were all in on Bijan Robinson, and it was correct. However, Tyler Algier also got there, and I mean, they combined for like 150 rushing yards between the two of them, and both scored a touchdown. So it definitely is viable for 2 running backs to be successful in fantasy football against the Carolina Panthers, and given how bad they've been, especially again, 30-point implied team total. That's 4 touchdowns to go around. Obviously they could just kick a bunch of field goals, but 3 to 4 touchdowns to go around. If all of the running backs get them, Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler could both pop off. And also, playing Austin Eckler can give you the opportunity to pay up for Amon-Ra St. Brown, which could be the key to the slate.
And let's just pivot to wide receivers, because Amon-Ra St. Brown is in your list of wide receivers. And I think there are a lot of folks who are down on him right now. We've seen 2 down weeks after he started the season just on fire. And I'm noticing, like, even on our trade shows, people are like, should I trade him? And I'm like, I'm not moving the Sun God for any reason.
No, I am not moving him either right now. I think it's such a great opportunity for him. Like, okay, sure, he's coming off of a game where he only got 4 targets. That's kind of a bummer, but they freaking destroyed Dallas, and we're memeing them and trolling them like for half of the game. So he didn't really need to be involved in that matchup. Similar thing with Seattle. He only got 6 targets. They were up most of that game. Like, Seattle sort of came back towards the end, but they were dominating it. The last time that they had like an actual close matchup was when they played Arizona. He got 8 targets. The week before that, they lost to Tampa Bay. He had 19 targets. So he's still a very important part of this offense, particularly when the game is going to be competitive. I think this could be a competitive game. Also, they have the best matchup right now for receivers. If you look at the season-long numbers, it paints a picture that is really good already. Since the beginning of the season, Minnesota's allowed 45 points per game to the receiver position, which is the most among any team. Since week 3, it's moved all the way up to nearly 55 points per game. They are allowing so many points to the receiver position. And so I'm buying in on the Detroit side of the ball in this one. And I love Amon-Ra St. Brown. I could easily see him popping off for 30 points. And while we're at it, I'm also interested in Tim Patrick in a tournament setting, particularly if I'm in a large field setting, in part because he's so cheap. He's $3,500. DraftKings, $4,800 on FanDuel. We've seen him be a down the field threat in the past. There's a game theory aspect to this. I think people are going to look at St. Brown's price and say, I can't make that happen given some of the other things happening. And so they're going to say, instead, I'm going to play Jameson Williams. What if you don't play Jameson Williams and instead you play the wide receiver 1 and the wide receiver 3? What happens then? And those 2 end up popping off. Like, I'm kind of playing it that way to see what happens. And I think that side of the ball is going to roll. And I could see this being like the shootout of the game of the week, honestly.
I love that. And if you want to know how right Austin is, I am a simpler minded DFS player. And that's precisely what I was going to ask you about JMO. And in my FanDuel rankings, Austin, I fit JMO in because I know it's a great game environment. And in FanDuel, which favors touchdowns, JMO has been scoring them. So if you want to know how right Austin is, if you want to get different, JMO ain't the way to get different. Let me tell you, because that's exactly where my brain went. So I love that you brought that up. Let's move back to the top of your list. DK Metcalf has not been getting the respect he probably deserves this season.
No, it's kind of surprising to me. Like, he's still been a killer receiver. Like, he's had some rough spots here and there. Kind of had a weird route running issue, but in the game, I guess it was last week against San Francisco, but he's still getting a ton of targets. He had 11 targets in that game against San Francisco. A little bit less the week before against the Giants. It was down to 7, but when they played Detroit, had 12 targets. So he's been getting plenty of volume. He's been a little low on the yardage, but he's had 3 games so far this year with 100 yards receiving. The matchup is really good. So this is also kind of backs up what I was saying earlier about how it's surprising that Atlanta is currently ranked as the 18th best matchup for quarterbacks. They have allowed the 5th most points to wide receivers since week 3. So they are allowing volume to happen through the air.
It's probably just those interceptions. I know you don't get penalized terribly for interceptions, but it's probably those that are just dragging them down a little bit. So.
Yes, and I don't think they've played a ton of dual threat quarterbacks so far this year too. And so if they're not allowing rushing touchdowns, that's also going to kind of depress the average points. And also they played the Carolina Panthers. So once again, there was that. Also, freaking Taysom Hill destroyed them whenever.
Yeah, and that counts as a tight end.
Yeah, exactly. So there's there's a lot of noise and all of what's going on there. So, but they have been giving up points to receivers. So I really like DK Metcalf. And I went back and I was like looking at the types of receivers that they allowed points to. And it's typically that traditional X receiver. So it's that role that DK Metcalf will play. And I feel good about him in this spot. And then once again, I'll mention JuJu Smith-Schuster. I'm not going to go too deeply into it because we already discussed it. But I love betting on Andy Reid coming out of a bye week. I think this is an interesting way to get access to that game against the San Francisco 49ers. San Francisco, they've been pretty decent against the receiver position. They've allowed the 5th fewest points.
Yeah.
Since week 3 to receivers. So it's not a great matchup, but again, this is 4K. And because I'm trying to play Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I also, I mentioned Jonathan Taylor or Saquon Barkley as my running back, I got to punt a couple of places.
Yeah.
So you get Tim Patrick and you get Smith-Schuster, and it opens up some other salary options elsewhere.
And for me, it's kind of a middle tier play. I'm going with Deontay Johnson. And this is, again, Austin said, we tend to find our defenses we like to pick on. Washington is an easy defense to pick on. We saw what Zay Flowers did to that Washington secondary last week. Deontay Johnson plays that exact same role. Now, obviously, Andy Dalton is not Lamar Jackson, but I think Andy Dalton knows who gets him fed, and that's going to be Deontay Johnson. I actually like Xavier Leggett if I'm building a lineup that wants to get real different, Austin. I don't think a lot of people are going to want to start this kid. And again, you cannot understate how bad this Washington secondary is. And then they also lost Jonathan Allen on their defensive line, which is going to create pass rush trouble for them as well. You mentioned that the Detroit game could get crazy. I think this Washington-Carolina game could get crazy with just two teams with no defense and some playmakers on offense. It'll be real interesting to see if Jonathan Brooks is back in the lineup, because what a game for him to come back to. But I feel like they'll ease him back regardless. The one person we haven't talked about, and he didn't make either of our list, and we've talked about how not great he is, but against this Washington, is Andy Dalton a play for some really weird lineups, or is that going a little bit too far?
I probably wouldn't do it except for like a large field tournament. I would consider it. So I usually am not entering enough lineups that I would move that far down to get to an Andy Dalton situation. I'm usually doing 3 lineups that for tournaments every week, and I will bet on players that I think I feel more comfortable with. Now, sometimes later in the year when I'm feeling pretty good and I've like built my bankroll throughout the year, I'll say, let me try a 20 entry max this week. And I will still pick 3 lineups, and I will enter, I'll pick 3 stacks. Essentially, I'll say I want access to this quarterback, and I'm going to stack him with different combinations of players. I'll do that with 3 different quarterbacks, and I'll do 6 lineups each for that. So that's 18 of my 20 lineups. And then I have 2 lineups to play with. And that's where I will do something more weird and say, okay, Andy Dalton, sure. That would be the situation where I would do that. If you are someone who is somehow able to crank out lineups and do 150 entry, which I have done that once, but it was for the Super Bowl, and it was that
you had 2 weeks to build it.
And I had 2 weeks to build it. So very different situation. But if you are somehow doing that, then sure, having some lineups exposures to Andy Dalton is fine. But it's not something that I'm going to be like bending over backwards to make happen.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
I would rather, sorry to say that,
come
back to this. I would rather just play Jaden Daniels and one person on the Carolina Panthers side as my way to like get access to the chaos of that game.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And as we're getting closer to the end here, we got tight ends. So we're each going to be giving you one here. Austin, go ahead.
Yeah. So I told you, I like this Atlanta matchup. We're going back to this with Kyle Pitts, everyone's favorite person to root for. He is $4,500 on DraftKings, $5,900 on FanDuel. The matchup is actually pretty good. And I was surprised to see this, but Seattle, they have allowed the 7th most points to the tight end position since week 3, averaging about 14.5 points to tight ends. One thing that I think is going to become true about, or is already true about this Atlanta offense, is that it's going to be a different player every week. We've talked about this before with the Kansas City Chiefs. We've talked about it with the Buffalo Bills, where one week it's going to be Drake for Atlanta. 1 week it'll be Drake London. 1 week it'll be Darnell Mooney. 1 week it's going to be Bijan Robinson. And I think this is the week it could be Kyle Pitts because they're going to be pushed to throw the ball a lot. And the Seattle front seven has been very banged up, which should provide some opportunity for Kyle Pitts to take advantage of mismatches. So I really like the spot for him. And he's only $4,500. Like, that is what we dream of in a punt tight end, and he has the potential volume upside that it could easily pay off and be the key aspect of your favorite lineup. I mean, heck, Kate Otten was in the Milli Maker winner last year or last week. Certainly, Kyle Pitts can do the same.
Yeah, I like that. And if you're new to the show or new to DFS, you may notice something with Austin, and we talk about this often, but it's pretty evident this week. Tell yourself a story about some of these games. There's a reason Austin is picking multiple players from the same games because the game is likely to be a good game and you need to find out who you think is going to pop. And like Austin said, Atlanta's kind of shuffling who's going to pop. So I think Kyle Pitts, I think you're absolutely right. It could be Kyle Pitts this week. For my tight end, I'm going to chase volume, and that's going to be Dalton Schultz. What's interesting about the Green Bay Packers is they give up the 5th most points to tight ends, but it hasn't been really a season-long thing of them giving up a ton of points to tight ends. They've really gotten killed in the last 2 weeks, but they allowed touchdowns in the 2 weeks before that. It was very bad games. Nick Vannett had 2 catches for 9 yards and a touchdown, and then Josh Oliver had 2 catches for 10 yards and a touchdown. But over the last 2 weeks, Colby Parkinson had 7 catches for 52 yards, and then Trey McBride had 8 catches for 96 yards. With Nico Collins out, we've seen an uptick in Dalton Schultz's usage. I think he had a 20+% target share last week. He just didn't do anything with it. It's Stephon Diggs and it's Tank Dell, but they're still throwing the ball to Dalton Schultz. And now you get a matchup that kind of plays a little bit more favorable than the New England Patriots. And so I think Schultz is a good one. And again, in a game environment that I'm chasing, that Green Bay Houston game.
Yeah, I think that's a very smart pick. And to your point, over the season, Green Bay has allowed just under 14.5 points per game to the tight end position. Since week 3, it has moved up to 17.5. Surely mostly in part of those last 2 weeks. So I think it's definitely a good way to attack this. And I agree that game environment does look very juicy. And it's a way to, I think it's a good way to get different to play Dalton Schultz, because some people may want to play Jordan Love and Tucker Kraft and chase to what happened with Tucker Kraft 2 weeks ago, but flip the script and say it's Dalton Schultz. And, oh, by the way, maybe Tank Dell doesn't get there and Stephon Diggs doesn't hit his full ceiling. He still be fine for maybe cash games, but he needs to hit probably 30 points to pay off at his salary in a tournament. So why not go with Dalton Schultz and get your exposure that way?
Yep. I love it. And for the first time ever, Austin, I feel like defense is if we have to position, and I'll go first on this one just because I went the boring route. My favorite play for tournaments is Buffalo, but it's really only a play on DraftKings. And I agree wholeheartedly with Austin that you can't play them on FanDuel at the 5K, and you want to start at the bottom and find the defense you feel comfortable with. Cleveland Browns were one. Cincinnati Bengals were another, though actually I think they're high on FanDuel as well because FanDuel hates me. But your pick, Austin, is my second pivot pick. You actually got to the sheet before me this week, so I'll let you kind of talk about if you're on FanDuel, do not play Buffalo, play this team instead.
Yeah, so I am intrigued by the Los Angeles Rams defense this week. They are only $3K on DraftKings. They're $4,100 on FanDuel. I'm a big fan of just the matchup against the Vegas Raiders. I think first off, the Raiders, they're in a little bit of transition right now. Like, they just traded away Devontae Adams. There's a case to be made that they aren't exactly in a position to make a big push. Maybe that means it comes out fighting, but they're probably going to have Aiden O'Connell again under center. He's still getting experience. Inexperienced quarterbacks tend to make mistakes. And then the Rams are coming off of a bye week, so they're well rested. We have seen their pass rush be a little bit frisky here and there. It's not like a elite defense yet by any means, but the thing that you're betting on for defense is variance, and all the Rams have to do is score a touchdown, and suddenly they're going to be in the optimal lineup. And I think because of the context and the situation on the Vegas Raiders side, there's the potential for that to happen.
My apologies if you touched on this. My alarm was going off. We don't normally record at this time. So I had to ask my wife to turn that off for me. But the other thing I like about the Rams defense is the Rams are a team that can control the ball on offense with Kyren Williams. And so that could keep the score low on both sides of the ball, which is good for fantasy defense as well.
Yeah, I love it.
All right, guys. What we end the show with is what we call the Valedictorian Shootout. That is Austin and I going head to head. And Austin, I stole one from you last week. We both scored terribly. 121.4 for me, 110.7 for you. These are just the lineups we announce on this show. So we're announcing early. And if somebody's out or there's a pivot, we don't allow it because we're announcing it on air for you guys. So sometimes these are ugly. Austin, we both took zeros at wide receiver last week. So no bueno. Austin is 2-4 on the season. My lineup for this week, you've probably heard us talk about most of these guys. So my lineup for this week is going to be Jordan Love, Brian Robinson. I did not get a chance to talk about Tony Pollard. Buffalo gets gashed by running backs. We saw it with Breece Hall and Braylon Allen a little bit last week. So I'm going to go Tony Pollard there. Deontay Johnson on the other side of the ball, Terry McLaurin. I think that's going to be a wonderful game. JuJu Smith-Schuster. And then I had to fit a wide receiver in to stack with Love. I wanted it to be Jordan Reed. I could not afford Jordan Reed. But Christian Watson scored a touchdown last week. He feels like a good play this week. And then obviously Dalton Schultz. And because we do DraftKings scoring, Austin, I was able to get the Buffalo Bills defense in there.
Incredible. We have some overlap.
I knew we would. Yeah.
I will probably end up changing my cash lineup, I will say, between now and Sunday, which I do every week. I tweak a little bit here and there, and you should be doing that as we get injury notifications and things like that. But right now I have Kirk Cousins in at quarterback. I have 2 running backs, Kyren Williams and Brian Robinson, who, if he doesn't play, I will replace with Austin Eckler.
Yeah, I'll give us both Eckler there, so we're going to get the same amount of points regardless. So.
Exactly. I have 4 receivers. I have Wan'Dale Robinson, who we didn't talk about, but he still gets a ton of volume. And even with Malik Neighbors probably back, I think he'll get plenty of volume.
I think it's better. I think it's better if Malik Neighbors is back, to be honest. So.
Yeah, true. Jacoby Myers at $5,400, a similar line of thinking as with Brock Bowers. I needed a punt play at receiver, so I went with Andre Yoshivas at $3,800. And then I also have Deontay Johnson in my flex spot currently. He's in the 4 o'clock slate of games, so if things are going poorly, I will swap him out for someone with more upside. My tight end is Colby Parkinson, and my defense is also the Buffalo Bills.
Okay, so you were able to get Buffalo, like I said. Great on DraftKings, folks. Terrible on FanDuel. That's just what it comes down to. Not terrible play, terrible price. Last reminder, guys, you can play with us. Links in the description of this video. Also, links in the description are in the intro of Austin's article that's going to drop on Saturday. Last week on DraftKings, Ciao Bello 1981 takes down the tournament. That is their 5th win with us on DraftKings. They had 148.4 points. You heard that beat me in Austin's Thursday lineup by about 30 points. And then I think this is, I'm just going to ERTLT. I don't know if they pronounce it or if this is just a lot of initials. This is their first one of the season. They've been playing with us for a while. They took down the FanDuel tournament 160.46. Austin, remind everybody of all the great DFS work you do here at Club Fantasy.
Yeah, so first off, you can catch us here every Friday to talk cash and tournaments for the main slate on DFS Academy. Josh Hudson and I have a Thursday show that drops every week, breaking on the Thursday night showdown slate. I would say you could go watch that now, but I forget. It's Thursday for me. The game hasn't started yet.
You could definitely go watch it and see if they were right, though.
Yeah, and then roast us if we weren't. And then also, as Ryan mentioned, the A-List, the cash article drops every week on Saturday. It'll be a little bit more updated, account for some of the injury news that'll drop Friday afternoon and evening. So make sure you're checking that out on clubfantasyffl.com.
Yeah, you get good entertainment from this show. You get great information on Saturday because you have more data to work with. So always check that article out. And Austin will let you know if some of his plays have changed from today because of the news that's dropped. And it could be, Brian Robinson. It'll certainly not be Jonathan Taylor because, like I said, it's all but confirmed he's out, just giving Austin a hard time there. Guys, if you haven't subscribed to Club Fantasy yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. We do 12 shows a week. I'm pretty sure we go live or do a show every day except for Sundays where we watch the game so we can get all this great data for you. The next time you guys find us on air is going to be tomorrow morning, Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern. It is Start Sit Different Day, where all we do is answer start sit questions for an hour. There's no show sheet. There's no agenda. It is us looking to help you win fantasy football, and that's why you should subscribe to Club Fantasy. I hope you guys built some great DFS lineups. Pay attention to those injury reports. We will see you next week. Have a great weekend.